proper
Yeah.
started?
All right. Yeah, I'll hit the button for the intro music.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is a Friday episode, Solidarity Fridays, coming out. I wanted to say June 24, but I think it'll be the 25th. We're just recording this a day early. So today on the show, we're going to talk about the upcoming class. We're going to talk about some news. There's some nitrous oxide news and some other stuff going on. It's going to be fun. And just for those who don't know, we've got a class coming up July 22. There's two different editions. A kind of, noon and 5 my time, Mountain Time, Denver time. So +2 for East Coast, -1 for West Coast. And if you're outside of North America, I'm sorry, but Google's your friend there. I wish I had the times down. And we might have some other editions coming up really soon in other countries. I think we're looking a little bit down.
We do have an Australia group coming up. Let's see. That is going to kick off August 4th, and that's going to be 7 p.m. Australian time. More information should be up at psychedelicseducationcenter.com at the Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course pretty soon. So you'll be able to find out more there. But yeah, excited to finally have a nice time for those in Australia, not having to, try to always hit the East Coast time or Pacific time.
Excellent. Yeah, Australia's making big moves, right? I think sometimes I see news from down there about, clinical trials, and it's exciting times all over the world for psychedelic research and just evolution. So that's a great move.
I was reading that psychedelic medicine book recently, and there was a lot of talk on international pressures. I think we talked about this last session. And people were afraid of issues like trade sanctions or whatever else, and afraid to run research as a result of that related to the United States. So a country like Australia is in a really great position, because are we really going to put sanctions on Australia? I don't think so. So, Australia is doing great work, MindMed down there. There's a number of other really great organizations, EGA, I think. Amazing conferences have been going on down there for ages, and it's awesome. So really excited about Australia. Can't wait to be there someday. But in the meantime, let's just keep connecting.
Very cool. Very cool.
Cool. And anything else? We've got a religious freedom, religious liberty in the United States course coming up really soon. I was hoping to have that up last week, but hopefully this week. We'll see. You can sign up for it and we'll let you know about it. So get over there, psychedelicseducationcenter.com.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes for that one, because, I'm really excited about that. That's going to be about kind of looking into how the U.S. does the Religious Freedom Act, and how groups can apply as a church, right, for their right to use psychedelic medicines. Is that correct, Joe?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah. So understanding what the Religious Freedom Restoration Act is, understanding how the Native American Church did it. How did Santo Daime and UDV, União de Vegetal, I think, and how did they do it? And we actually have the padrino of the Santo Daime Church contributing as well to talk about how the case went, how everything flowed, and it's pretty awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of lawyers who have different types of expertise in religious liberties. We have Gary Michael Smith, who wrote Psychedelic Elects, a very big, pretty expensive legal book, but it's essentially a textbook that you can use perpetually to help navigate this really complicated area.
He's also written some cool articles for our blog you guys should go check out. And I think he might be doing some more stuff coming soon. So thank you, Gary Smith, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, a great ally, a great friend of the show, and just excited to be able to collaborate with lawyers in productive ways and, not get a big bill at the end of the month, So Well, Michelle, you want to kick us off on talking about the class at all, or how do we want to do this thing?
Yeah, so today on the podcast, we're thinking of starting the first half doing something just a little bit different. We thought we would, talk a little bit about the Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course, because we remind you all every, the beginning of every episode about it. But I think for folks who haven't taken it, they're not quite sure exactly what it is, who it could be for, what kind of things you learn, who teaches it. So I came up with a bunch of questions, and I thought, instead of like a guest interview tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Joe and Kyle just for like 20 minutes. So they could teach us a little bit more about, what do they teach at this course? Who's it for, right? So let's dive right in. So the class is called Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. And we have two versions of the course, correct, guys? We have like a learn at your own pace, a self-learner version, but there's also a live 8-week version, which I think is the really valuable one. And that's like really interesting to me. So could you tell us a little bit about what's the live 8-week version like? Like, you guys meet once a week with the whole class. What kind of things do you discuss?
Yeah. So it's a 8-week like hybrid course. So we have a bunch of pre-recorded material, a lot of interviews, comes with, for those that have been around and been following us for a long time, it contains the first course that we put together called Navigating Psychedelics Lessons on Self-Care and Integration. And this was really a course that Joe and I put together because the conversation around integration just started to take off. We ended up I think we released it in 2017. So we were working on it throughout 2016. And we were realizing that there weren't too many great resources, or just many resources in general, about integration with psychedelics. So we collected a bunch of interviews and put together kind of like our own curriculum to walk through some basic harm reduction practices, best practices for navigating experiences, including like some of Stan Grof's framework. And then, I think the real bread and butter of that is the cool master classes that we were able to get. So we had like Dr. Catherine McLean, she used to be at Johns Hopkins, Ashley Booth from the Aware Project to talk about 5-MeO DMT integration and iboga. We had our breathwork teachers, Lenny Elizabeth Gibson, there to talk about how they approach integration from their framework of facilitating breathwork for over 25 plus years. Who else do we have? Lots of people, Richard Grossman. I mean, it's just packed. You go to the website to check out who's on there. And then as we started going, we realized that, hey, there's a lot of professionals joining the class. So we decided to add on some additional interviews that are more clinically focused. So think of it as like a nice archive of really great interview lectures and course content. So we're trying to streamline the process for you, figure out what you need for foundational understanding of psychedelics. It's kind of like a Psychedelics 101, 102. And then, so we provide a nice little outline for you to follow along. And then we come to class for an hour and a half for the 8 weeks. And really, it's an open classroom. I do some presentations and do reviews because we have CE approval for those looking for that. And it's just for the live portion. So I wanted to do a little bit of presenting there and review. And then really just kind of open it up for a lot of discussion. It's probably my favorite part to just have a classroom to interact with other students, really learn from each other, really trying to build community with the course. I'm always blown away by who shows up from the people that never had a psychedelic experience, therapists that are just starting to get involved, or just wellness specialists, people in the coaching field. And they're like, wow, I've been reading a lot of this research. I just want to get involved somehow. I saw this course, want to sign up. We've had psychedelic researchers in our class, people actually doing research that just wanted to learn more. And I don't know, maybe just wanted to hang out with us, which was kind of cool.
Because you guys go into like some context and history and like a little bit of like the philosophy and the psychology behind like, how psychedelics work for healing, right? Is that correct?
I'd call it theory. We'll go into the philosophy, the history, the theory, which I think most people don't really get into. And we're operating from like a Grofian transpersonal framework primarily.
And what does
That's
that
our
mean?
operating
Let's just
system.
stop right there. Like, I think a lot of folks might not even know, like, what's the value of that? What's a Grofian framework? What's a transpersonal framework, right? Like, let's get basic.
All right. Right. So, our lineage is, probably goes back to Freud, if not before that. Some of our friends might argue Plato.
Just
but let's
2,000
not
years.
go there. Yeah, it's relatively young. Yeah. So, Freud, discoverer of the unconscious. I think the funny thing there is, he's hunting for a whale while standing on its back, I think was the funny line about Freud.
Yeah.
And then, Jung really took it and split and kind of developed his own thing. And we're Grof is essentially like a third pillar of greats in psychology. Grof is not exclusively informed by Freud and Jung. There's others like Otto Rank and many others in the European psychological tradition that have informed him. And he was a Freudian, though. He started his training after reading... Kyle, do you remember the name of the book?
Realms.
I want to say Realms of the Human Unconscious.
Dreams,
That's
right?
clearly a Grof book.
Is that what it's called?
I think so. Yeah, it was like a Freudian classic, which was illegal because he was living in Soviet Prague at the time. So he had a contraband book.
Right.
Totally changed the direction of his career. Went right to medical school, took Freudian training, took a medical degree, and just amazing. So what happened? He went through, had all the training, was doing Freudian analysis in clinics and working at a hospital, and was not very impressed with the results coming from Freudian therapy. And all of a sudden LSD came on the scene and had this experience. And, this is all groundwork, unfortunately. I promise I'm going in the right direction. So he had this really crazy LSD experience. I think his first time was with a researcher who was experimenting with pumping the brainwaves, which means he had brainwave entrainment devices on and a stroboscopic light going to help entrain the brave waves underneath the influence of LSD, and just a really massive experience. A light, a million times brighter than the sun, all this kind of fun, classical, mystical experience stuff. And, went in a materialistic, mechanistic Freudian, came out a devotee of Shiva. And what does that mean? That in 14 hours or whatever, however long that was, that kind of a change can happen. He lays out the story beautifully in some videos you can find on YouTube and in his books. So essentially, he was no longer stuck in this kind of mechanistic Pavlovian, or not even Pavlovian, Freud's a little bit different, but this kind of more mundane operating system of everything's kind of stimulus response and survival oriented, and kind of built out a trajectory of what, kind of looks similar to what Maslow did with the hierarchy of needs, but went beyond it. Later with Fadiman, Maslow, and others, kind of created transpersonal psychology that seems to include really extraordinary experiences like past lives, weird stuff that you can't explain, mystical experiences. So stuff that you can't explain, like you have surgery, maybe you die, and then what's happening 2 rooms over, or what the surgeon was saying while you were flatlining. There's like things that are impossible to appear to happen. He wrote a book called When the Impossible Happens that covers a lot of these stories in his life, right?
Cool.
And, this is not something that people, respected researchers, want to talk about. If you're at Hopkins and you rely on government funding, you're not going to want to talk about the spooky transpersonal things that might happen once in a while, because it could risk this going through the FDA successfully or future grant funding. So there's reasons why people don't want to talk about it, and I'm okay with that. There's also philosophical reasons, right? Like they don't believe the stories, But it's like, how many anecdotes do you have to hear until you feel like you have to go a little further? So Lenny says the primary contributions to psychology, this is Lenny Gibson, Kyle and I's mentor. His primary contributions are expansion of the cartography of the psyche, and then all these, perinatal experiences. So
Right.
what happens during the gestation and birth process, and how could that impact personality and the psyche long term?
So fascinating.
So it's no longer arguable that stuff that happens during pregnancy informs what the personality looks like later. Like, this is kind of just a given now, right? So yeah, there's a lot there. But expansion of the cartography of the psyche. So we have to include like the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, transpersonal realms, possibly entities. Kyle, is there anything I missed there around the transpersonal, like cartography?
The transpersonal perinatal realms, kind of like what he's added to the human cartography of the psyche.
It's so interesting.
Right.
As someone who, I have an undergraduate degree in psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but I have a basic foundational understanding. But what I do have is a lot of psychedelic experience, right? That's why I'm here. And it is so other. Like, it's just so other sometimes, right? It's so inexplainable. Like, there is something like transhuman, transpersonal about it. It is not, sometimes things come from like, maybe they are coming from my own psyche, but sometimes it feels like so much more than that. Like, getting deeper into my own work, I keep thinking like all these things that I thought were like untrue, like, oh, that can't be real, yada, yada. And then you eat mushrooms and I'm like, well, magic must be real. Like, all this stuff must be real. Like, because I've had these experiences that these are the only like frameworks that I have to explain like what could possibly be going on. But that's probably another podcast. But I appreciate you going into that. I think it's really helpful for folks, especially, and that's why it's in the course for clinicians and therapists, because if you really want to become a psychedelic therapist or facilitator or integration professional, or even like other just work in psychedelia, like, you need more than just a few psychedelic experiences or interest or a little bit of money, right? You really need to start understanding like so many different fields of study in general, like a basic understanding of psychology, especially transpersonal, maybe Jungian, also maybe Freudian. There's just a lot of like useful tools there, but also then, indigenous practices, Eastern practices, meditation. And I do think transpersonal psychology does start to like kind of weave those together. It doesn't exclude them as like, oh, that's another thing that other cultures do. It's like, no, these are human experiences, right? That are so crucial to some folks' growth, to healing, to just learning about yourself and the world, or maybe, beyond that. So I think it's like super helpful.
Let me mention a couple of things, Michelle.
Yeah, please.
This one, well, two things. So you said transhuman at one point. Are you familiar with the transhuman thing?
Like,
the transhumanism?
actually, I just a little bit, but I didn't mean it in like transhumanism
so I know.
way.
I know.
Yeah. I actually thought that as
but
soon
it's
as it came out of my mouth.
But it's fascinating because one of this real pioneer transhumanist was family friends with the Learys, Genesis P. Orridge. Very fascinating individual. They died recently. Pushed so many limits in transhumanism. It's fascinating. Just not part of this discussion, but people go check that whole thing out.
Yeah,
it's fast. It's so interesting. I've been following it for decades now.
They were friends with the Learys. I'm like, oh, I have to go back into the literature. That's what I'll be doing late tonight.
Genesis P. Orridge, fascinating. And then secondly, like, it's kind of, it feels a little abstract, right? Like, why would these weird theories be helpful?
Because it's a weird experience. You need weird theories to understand weird experiences, though, right? Sorry, like, not to interrupt.
So a totally traditional psychologist, psychiatrist was involved in this case with one of our friends. And this person had a really big experience on psilocybin. And the therapist attached to some of these studies wanted to talk about how this really big experience might be related to previous, biographical things. And this individual, the experiencer, had nothing to say in relation to biographical material. And in fact, it totally took the wind out of her sails and said, like, this, like, I have no interest in talking to you any further about this. So as a practitioner, a medical professional in this space, including researchers, not allowing people space is a big deal. So how can you make the judgment that this thing is or is not transpersonal just because you read a few Dawkins books, you're like, yeah, fuck that. There's no transpersonal, it doesn't exist. It's like not really helpful in the practical day to day. Just because you're a scientific atheist, like, does that make you a reasonable therapist for somebody that's still going to church twice a week?
That's a good point.
Yeah, like the difference in your worldview might not make you a compatible person, right? It's a really interesting problem, and we've got to figure out how can these professionals make more space and be more open.
That makes me think of two questions. So so that's why you wanted to start this class, right? To start exploring these topics and to just
it's an extension of our mission.
Yeah.
Of bringing Grof and breathwork forward. Yeah. And, integration. It just seemed like people wanted to learn from us.
And my other question that just came up when you were just talking is so are these the kinds of discussions that occur in the live course every week? I bet it gets pretty deep. I've heard you say on the podcast, Joe, that those teaching the leading the discussion after every week's class is your favorite part of your job at Psychedelics Today. Right? Right. Is that true?
It's a lot.
And tell me why. And
totally.
I'm jealous now because I don't really participate in that part.
That's right. You haven't been through it yet. You got to join. Yeah. We'll pay Michelle to join this next round. So, what we want to do, how do we want to put this? We've got a really busy work schedule here, right? Like trying to hustle and try to make it work and keep growing and all that. And to be able to spend an hour and a half 2 different times a week with 2 different groups and helping them kind of navigate this really weird terrain feels really great. It's like, you remember when Luke Skywalker kind of crashed on Dagobah? And Yoda was kind of being a little uppity and being a little jerk to Luke. And, it eventually, so this idea of okay, you're this new person trying to explore this new territory. In a way, you're like Luke Skywalker crashing on Dagobah. And we're just trying to help you understand the landscape really well so that, your superpowers can come out, right? And help other people. I'm not really interested in being a psychedelic therapist. I like doing sessions once in a while when I can find a good way to do it, but it's not really my jam. It's not my thing, but holotropic breathwork for sure is. But, you can't really even do that weekly. You kind of have to do it maximum every other week, unless you can take all the rest of the time off to recover. So it takes a lot of energy, but teaching this to people who are really passionate and really curious. And, we've had really rationalist people, super clinically oriented doctors who are experiencing this weird transpersonal stuff for the first time, and they start becoming open and interested and kind of understanding. It's this watching the opening and watching the curiosity bloom in people, and the openness, I think, is the most important part for me. And just watching that develop is so cool. And then we do this integration project at the end. And, it could be as simple as a stick figure representing your experience, or some people have done massive paintings, trying to reconcile the perinatal matrices of Grof with chakras and acupuncture points and stuff, because they're professionals in those spaces. Ooh. It's just massive amount of diversity in what people come up with. We've had kind of documentaries almost. And
so you do a final project that I don't know what the integration project is. Yeah. So it's the final, instead of a test or something. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's pass fail, except everybody passes.
Sounds like my kind of class.
I mean, it's really about your process.
Yeah, right. Sarah Lawrence was that way?
Of course. Yeah. Tell me can you tell me a little bit, about the integration project, Kyle? And what is that about?
Well, when we first started this off, we were talking about integration. So it was all right, well, we need some, application here. What does integration mean? So actually putting I talk about it in 2 ways. You can either take it if you have a personal experience and really make it personal to your journey. And that could be with a psychedelic experience, could be with anything that you're really just trying to integrate and start to actually move some of this wisdom forward and start to apply what you're learning. And so, sometimes people, make little video documentaries, or they make art, or they create poetry, create songs. And then we also have like the other side of it where people end up creating, like integrating into their practice. So, clinicians, therapists, like as Joe mentioned, like somebody was studied aromatherapy and Ayurvedic medicine, and they ended up taking some of that Grofian framework and trying to understand their Ayurvedic framework through a Grofian lens. We've had people, just design business ideas, and I think some of them actually came to fruition, right? And that's also part of the integration process.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you do get those downloads, or you're trying to, align with what you're doing in life, and so really trying to create that opportunity and a little bit of accountability, right? Sometimes having that accountability is helpful to start moving things forward. So that's the idea for the project, just really getting our students more engaged in their own process, which is really important.
Which is so important, right? If you want to help someone else through their process too, if that's your goal, like if you are a therapist or a clinician that, wants to be a facilitator, a psychedelic therapist, or just help folks through integration, which is really like all you can do now. Well, not exactly true with ketamine and all those kinds of things, but I feel like, I guess like there's some saltiness sometimes in the community when you hear about clinicians who don't have their own psychedelic experience. But I think the saltiness is really against not having their own process, right, of integration and understanding these transpersonal, weird, otherworldly experiences. So how can you really help me understand mine better if you're not doing deep work, right? And I think that's kind of where that controversy kind of takes root. So I think this is so useful. And even if you don't want to be, that brings me to my next question, actually. So
we have to go easier on the doctors. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
I know, and so I don't mean to
tell them to do it secretly. You don't have to come out. Just do it. Just do it safely.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'd like you more, but it's okay to be secret.
And that's like a big part of this work. Like I'm going through actually being home this a whole month. I'm going through my own process pretty deeply. And, it's not all for sharing with the whole world, right? I'm not posting about it on Instagram and stuff because I'm still processing it all and I'm still learning. And like some of it is just kind of deeply private, and that's okay.
Michelle, what's the Ram Dass line?
I think you're enlightened.
You think you're enlightened to go spend a few days with the family?
Well, if I'm not literally floating 6 inches above the ground after spending 5 weeks with my parents and not all hating each other, actually I just left their house today and now I'm back in the city, and it's actually gone really well. It's not perfect, but I think we're all doing so. I think COVID actually kind of forced. My parents didn't have psychedelic experiences this last year that they told me about, but I think we're all just really deep in our own process this year, just trying to learn, or just using all this extra time that's away from loved ones to really learn, when I can spend more time with them, how do I want to show up, right? And I think one of my big lessons this past month is that I don't want to show up with resentment and anger. I just want to show up with gratitude and love. And it's a hard thing to be consciously conscious of, because you're like, oh, why did you just say that? That's just such a dick manipulative thing to say. I actually just want to show up with kindness and love, with these people that raised me. And, anyway, I'm going to start crying. I gotta. So let's move back to the course a little. I have a couple more questions. So clearly, the course is for clinicians, therapists, but who else is ideal candidates to take this class? Who else have you had, and what cool things have they done?
Had so many things. We've had a number of life coaches. We had a number of kind of functional medicine coaches. there's so many people. Like the definition of clinicians is far more broad than we think.
Cool.
So there's been like movement people, like Court Wing, who's written for us a bunch. We keep talking about Court. Sorry, and you're welcome, Court. But he got a lot out of the course and really loved it. And he's kind of I don't really know how to put it. Call him a trainer, but more than that, much more than a trainer.
Like yoga teachers, stuff like that. I imagine that world having a lot of overlap.
Massage therapists.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's not limited to clinicians and therapists. So obviously we have some more conversations around clinical application. If you're interested, join us. I mean, it's not closed off to just clinicians and therapists. But if you are a clinician and therapist, this can really add value to your practice if you're trying to get involved a little bit more. But yeah, as Joe mentioned, like wellness specialists, coaches. I mean, we've had people that are trying to just make a life transition and stepping into this work. So like I said, like we've had people that don't have any sort of clinical experience, they're just interested in the topic and just wanted to come take the class, to doctors taking the class and really just trying to better understand the landscape so that they can serve their clients better.
So interesting. I imagine like this would be a great course if you wanted to be like a trip sitter or a facilitator at a retreat, because often you don't need to be like, an MSW, a licensed therapist, to go and like work in that space, but you still should be like educated, in a way, or like have a grounding, a foundation. And I imagine, that this would be super helpful for that. Also, Oregon has like a year and a half to open up their psilocybin therapy program. And if you guys go back and listen to our episode with the fruiting bodies, Rebecca and Alon, they were telling us that facilitators in Oregon won't need to be licensed therapists. They will need to go through a training in Oregon, but those trainings aren't ready yet. And this could be a good like foundational course to take to get like, all your ducks in a row, and then, go take the Oregon training program. And then you could be ready to be a facilitator in like a year and a half from now in Oregon. I think that's like really exciting to me.
It's so crazy that it's right down the road.
I know.
We're this close from that. As soon as they detail what the requirements are, we will be looking at what we can do there to get involved in Oregon. But there's plenty of people in Oregon too.
Yeah,
I'm sure it'll be fine.
For sure.
Love how I'm calming down in my old age. But this is a really great foundation for anybody that wants to figure out where they want to go in the space.
Right.
There's not much talk about foundations. Like what kind of foundation do you have before even making a decision? This is like that kind of, how some people went to like a 5th year of high school. It's kind of like just figure it out before you kind of enroll in an undergrad.
I never heard of that.
Is that an option?
That was, maybe I was hanging out with a rough crowd. I don't know. So, a lot of people need to figure out, spend a little bit of time figuring out where they want to go with this stuff. And this is part of that. It's really serious. You get a lot of really great information. This is not a course on how to trip sit, how to facilitate. This is a course on theoretical, practical foundations, harm reduction, safety, orienting yourself and finding your own path through this space, because not everybody should be a trip sitter. Not everybody should be a licensed facilitator. Well, there's plenty of licensed facilitators that shouldn't be licensed facilitators, right? So we've got a long way to go, and there's a lot left to do. And we need to really, the comments. I keep looking up.
I'm just waving at people I know. I'm like, okay.
Eyes up here, Joe.
Sorry, but it's a great foundation, right? Like, and I think some people, they volunteer to be a trip sitter without, this happened to me. I don't mean some people. I volunteered to be a trip sitter because I wanted to learn. And I think what I learned is that I don't know if trip sitting is actually for me. It's hard. It's just like, it's not that it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of like decision making in a way, and like, oh, should I go help that person? Should I go bring them a tissue? Should I just trust their process and hold space for them? That can be the hardest part. I feel like for me, it's just like, when I see someone in pain, I want to try to fix it. I don't know, maybe it's like some deep rooted, like my mom taught me this or something, and to hold yourself back and to just kind of be present for them if they want it, but not like be overwhelmingly like huddling around them and making them feel like they're doing something wrong because they're crying so much or like whatever. It's really, really tricky. And so, and if you don't have like this theoretical framework to work through, you wouldn't even know that that's like the wrong thing to do. You probably would hop out of your seat and you might make them feel a little weird, and you might actually halt the process that they were like they might be grieving, or they might be really on the brink of, seeing something more clearly in a way. And you don't want to interrupt that, right? You just want to make sure they feel safe to keep going. And so,
do we have a good enough framework around what process is? Or should Kyle, you want to take a stab at this idea of process? We keep saying it, like your process, I'm in process.
We should be defining this stuff, right? Yeah, that's something we've been talking about internally. Like, yes, please.
Trying to think how I defined it. I didn't prep for this, but I think I actually do have a little bit of that definition in our trip journal. Just talking about the process. I mean, when I think about process, I think about. Well, I don't know. I guess I come back to just like even process thinking. Like everything is in relationship and everything is unfolding. And what is our relationship to the unfolding around us? And how do we engage with that? How do we stick with that? And how do we work with that material? So when I think about, in terms of like psychedelic integration, and we talk about follow the process, really means to follow your inner experience, follow the material that's emerging, stick with whatever's coming up, even if it's difficult emotions that are arising. Stick with that because there's probably something there, right? Like, there's this like frustration there. Yeah. And okay, well, stick with that. Like, where is that going to take you if you start to develop a relationship with this unfolding process? And I think it's really easy to kind of just like push that away or say like, oh, that didn't work for me. Like, it was really interesting. We had somebody years and years ago come to a breathwork session, and they left saying like, oh, nothing happened. And like, that was kind of like a waste of time. And then they started to come back. This person ended up like leaving the workshop just feeling really incomplete and feeling like they wasted their time, and came back and became really integral part of the community. Because actually after they started to follow that process, it was like weeks later, things just started to unfold in their life. And they're like, yeah, I didn't think anything really happened during that session, but as soon as I left, like all this stuff just started happening. And what is that? And that is a great question. What is that? I mean, I've had plenty of sessions where things have kind of unfolded. Yeah. So really, thinking about my own process where I've really stuck with it, just really, what is that? How does that unfold? What is going on there? I think I've shared this a couple times. I don't know if I've shared it just on the podcast or in the course, but when I talk about this, like I had this breathwork session where nothing was happening through the whole time. And I was so frustrated, so like irritated. And then we did some body work. And then I had this image around the earth and something strangling the earth, and it was tied up with my work life. And I was just like so irritated. I wanted to quit my job. And I felt like I couldn't because my manager lived with me. It was like those weird interpersonal dynamics. And like, it was just like me, him, and the boss managing this deli when I was in Burlington. And then about 3 weeks later, our boss gave us a letter, a 1 week's notice. He was closing the shop up. And I was like, well, I guess that just worked itself out. And, it was so interesting that I was so frustrated in this breathwork experience because nothing was happening. And then when I had the body work come up, there was all this work material. And then being frustrated that I really wanted to quit my job, but there was no way out. And that was the image of this snake just wrapping around the earth. There was no way. There was no exit. And so when we talk about that, we'll go back to some of our course content. My mind goes to the Grofian basic perinatal birth matrix 2, no escape, no exit, and that kind of Saturnian energy of being constricted. The uterine walls begin to contract, but there's no way out. And so what do you do with that? You stick with the process. You really just have to stick with it and ride it out for the most part. And yeah, and that
Literally.
Sometimes will come up for people that feel like they're constantly going insane on psychedelics. Like, it's never going to end. Oh my God, I just keep looping and looping and looping. That's like BPM-2 related content. But again, like really sticking with that. So yeah, the process. What is that? I'd love to hear your definition, Joe.
Well, I have to bring up Whitehead, unfortunately, but it's like this idea that everything is process and relation. Nothing ever exists alone. And everything's always becoming and perishing, us included. A chair, a rock, always becoming and perishing. A star becoming and perishing. And, everything has an arc. We start here, we end here. And everybody, if we're engaged in it, this is why I think Stoic philosophy is getting really big. This idea of like memento mori, like remembering death, remembering that sickness and health is not promised anywhere. I think I said that backwards. A happy, healthy life is not promised. So we must expect suffering. We must expect to go through trials and tribulations. And a lot of people try to deflect that through television, distractions, addictions, and more. Like when those feelings and whatever it is come up, we probably have a suite of 40 different things we can do to suppress that. Maybe it becomes most problematic when somebody develops an acute addiction, but only really a dangerous one, right? But being engaged with it, being able to lean in.
Yes.
Like I'm remembering a breakup from ages ago where I was like, all right, like I know how this goes. So let me just, boost my process as much as I can. So, sad music for days and days and days. And it worked out like pretty quickly, I think. And it was because I really leaned into the process. I'm not trying to be harsh about it at all, but I'm like, let's just lean in and be with it for as much as we can, as with as much intensity as can be made. And I think that's part of it. And Kyle, you always talk about like being curious.
Yeah.
I think there's something there. Like be curious about what's going on inside you and being with it and letting it unfold. It's your body knows what it's doing. Mm-hmm. The psyche knows what it's doing. We often just get in the way a little bit and need to trust it.
Yeah. No, it's really beautiful.
The body speaks a language we don't understand. I think that I haven't listened to the Pierre Bouchard episode yet, but I think there's something there about like a body's secret language, and we're learning that secret language as we proceed here. And I think everybody almost has their own secret language with their own body, right? It's not everybody's
nervous system is different, and really having to like tune into that and develop your relationship with that. I mean, that's what I talk a lot about, especially with like my somatic clients, like really developing this new relationship and this new language with our bodies, our intuition, learning how to tune into our nervous system, pay attention a little bit more. And it's hard, because it's hard. We have this mind-body split and say, oh, well, those feelings that I feel in my body are nothing. If it's not coming from my mind, then it's not valid.
It's so interesting though. Like I really love all the language you guys are using, like lean in, right? Or just like, I gave this all a lot of thought when I was writing my book. And like I have chapters on like how to navigate mushrooms and integration. And they were really hard chapters to write because I have this like kind of second nature process, and to put it into words was really hard. But when I was I called up Rosalind Watts, who works at Imperial College London. She's been one of the lead clinical psychologists on those trials for treatment-resistant depression. And she had this really interesting insight that helped me like contextualize this, which is that she was seeing that what mushrooms were doing for folks was it was teaching them to embrace their feelings, to lean in, like Joe was saying. And the psychedelic experience itself was teaching them that. And part of their integration was to continually do that. And that's a big part of I think how you navigate the space. You approach it with curiosity, right? You accept what's going on instead of avoiding it, and be open to it, even if it feels a little bad. And then you can there's usually deep learning when you do that. And I think that extends into the rest of your life if you're integrating. I think I just end up accepting and being open to things, and just working through my negative feelings instead of trying to drown them out with whatever, weed, alcohol, TV. There's still a balance. Everyone needs a break and to relax, right? But when your motive is always running away from your feelings, it gets harder. And I also talked to Bill Richards for my book, and he writes about this in his book, Sacred Knowledge, that it's just like a nightmare. If you run away from the monster, the whole dream just gets more scary, right? But if you kind of turn around and look at it and you're what? You realize it's not really a monster, probably. It's actually something that you are capable of dealing with. And yeah, I think that is just so important when we're thinking about, the process or navigating psychedelics and what does that mean. There are definitely people who have been working with these medicines a long time with clients that have a lot of insight into this, which is why your master classes and the course, who are talking to these kinds of folks is so important, because it makes that information more accessible to other people who want to, start their own process. Sorry to overuse that word a million times. Any more?
We use it way too much too.
Final thoughts on the course, stuff you want to share with people listening before we move on?
Oh, there's just so much to it. It's such a beautiful process. Process. So it's just amazing to watch people work through it and see what happens on the end, how excited and charged up they are about, I'm going to go to divinity school now and do this in a religious setting, or
cool.
I'm going to team up and, start something in Central South America or whatever it is. Yeah. And, a lot of people don't have a network, right? And this is a great way to jumpstart your psychedelic networking. This is a really hard field to get into, partly because of prohibition, partly for other reasons. And it's a little cliquey and a little tough. And this is a great way to start meeting people, and you can make your own little team and, make this a team sport as opposed to an individual sport. I was told recently MAPS made a new hashtag, Team MAPS. Cool. That's cool. But maybe Team Psychedelic.
Team Psychedelics today.
We'll see. Yeah. The longer the hashtag, the better, I think. So I'm in. No, it's cool though. I'm glad people are seeing that this needs to be a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
To use an overused phrase, no man is an island, and we need people. We need community. We've lost our tribal roots, and we need to figure out ways of reconnecting. In Europe, Europe had a lot of clubs. In America, we don't have very many clubs anymore, and we're really isolated here. And our culture is TV and Amazon, and hopefully you've got some other stuff going, but not always. So, it's a really big project to jump into the psychedelic space, and this course will help you do that. It'll help you understand some pitfalls and traps, and we made it because this is the thing we wanted when we were in undergrads or high school even. It would have saved us a lot of time, pain, and energy, right? So yeah, that's the long and short there. Kyle, anything on your side?
I think you hit it, and I just want to say, it's been really fun watching even some of the students grow. And Joe, you're talking about getting involved. I'm just even thinking about some of the students that have entered into the psychedelic field. we're able to like land positions at certain companies and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see people kind of take what they've learned and apply it and go out there and actually, carry it forward in some way. So it's really exciting and just humbling to be able to do this work. Just kind of pass on what Joe and I, have been learning over the years and just from our own experiences. I think about like, what did I need when I was going through a lot of this stuff? Most of my undergrad was exploring a lot of this because I was trying to develop my own framework for navigating spiritual emergence, near-death experiences, and psychedelics. And, I ended up creating a whole class on it in my undergrad. And so to some degree, it's been kind of carrying it forward to teach others. I'm just humbled and just grateful that I'm able to, teach it and spread the knowledge and wisdom.
So cool. No, thank you both for sharing so much. And, just what you were saying, like Joe, networking, it is hard in the psychedelic world. And just like how integration can, how community can be really helpful, how multiple perspectives and talking to people about some of your experiences can help you think about them in new ways, because we can all kind of get stuck in our mind ruts. And, and when you just have a bigger group of people to share things with and you see things from other people's point of view, it really helps. And then in learning about psychedelics and theory and facilitation, I think even more so. So so important to have a group of, other like-minded professionals that you can be open and ask stupid questions in front of, and no one's judging you and you're all learning, is such a good place to really just broaden your worldview. That's what it's all about, right? Just kind of widen how you think about the world and other people. Besides psychedelics, other people are the best way to do that. So I really appreciate you guys just putting all this time and effort into creating and hosting the course. How many, so it's 8 weeks and you guys do it at least 4 times a year. How many cohorts do you host a year? At least,
I don't know, 4 or 5
maybe. A
with
lot.
two groups.
Yeah.
I think something like that.
So there's always a chance if you're listening and you missed, the July dates, there will be more dates in September. And basically every season there's another class, basically another semester. And
it's going to evolve like this,
as
we mentioned, this is like a foundation and, we have a bigger program envisioned, and this is going to be kind of like the first step. So, we did have a lot of stuff mapped out before COVID, a lot of in-person training with breath work, being able to have the experiential components so you can be able to navigate and work through your own experience. So as things start to loosen up, we're able to go back in person and host these, trainings and workshops. We're only gonna go deeper. And something else that just popped in my head, just thinking about psychedelics and education, psychedelics are pretty weird, and to teach it and think that it's so streamlined and this is these are the things that we have to talk about in this way, and we've had it all figured out. I think if psychedelics taught me one thing, it's we know nothing, and I think this is where the curiosity comes back to. It's I think our teacher Lenny was talking to Stan. I think it was back in the 80s at Esalen, and Lenny was sharing a story with him, and Stan just looked at him and he said, "Many strange things happen on LSD."
Literally understatement of the century. But
Well, what else do you say after a 20-minute kind of ramble, right? Someone wants to tell you their trip tales. It's a great answer, but it's also really true.
So do you guys want to talk about a couple of these current events really quick? I think that about wraps up. We wanted to talk about navigating psychedelics.
Well, if they want to learn more, psychedeliceducationcenter.com or psychedelicstoday.com to learn more, or hit us up, support at psychedelicstoday.com, and we'll get back to you. If you have any questions on the course, happy to answer them. It is CE approved, and love to have you join us.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you guys so much. I think this like really laid it out. And I think in the future too, we can also talk about some of our other courses. That's not our only course offering, but I don't want to bore you all too much. So I thought we'd end the episode. Not that it's boring. Our courses are amazing, but I think you guys want to hear a little bit of our normal segment. And so, yeah, we got a couple stories here we thought we'd review really quick. I'll just start this first one. So a phase 2 trial of inhaled nitrous oxide for treatment-resistant major depression just came out, I think on June 9th. And there's a couple.
Yeah, I recall seeing a little bit ago.
Yeah, there's a couple articles. It was in Popular Science and it's in Lucid News. But basically, what's the verdict about nitrous oxide for depression?
Sounds like it's a possible treatment option.
Promising.
Yeah. They still have to go through more research, and that's what they're concluding. But super interesting to explore nitrous as a potential treatment for depression. And the person that was thinking about that was just thinking about ketamine and how nitrous also is an antagonist of the NMDA glutamate receptor, and that's the same that ketamine also interacts with. So yeah, it's super interesting. And one thing that they did point out was that nitrous is a pretty clean drug. So when they turn off the gas, it stops. Versus people that might take like lozenges, it might be like 2-3 hours, and then you have like the tail end with the half-life of norketamine and whatnot. So really fascinating. I'm really interested. Somebody that Joe and I know kind of brought this up, and I didn't really think that nitrous might have had any sort of clinical application. So it was really interesting to see this, but also kind of gets me excited just thinking about our, dream shadow lineage, thinking about William James. It was his first drug of choice with nitrous.
He was really into nitrous, right? Yeah. So interesting. But yeah, I thought that that's where my mind went when I read these articles. Like, it's similar to ketamine. Like it works a little bit similar in the brain, but also it's not a Schedule I substance similar to ketamine. So if more trials proved that this might be like a worthy depression treatment. What do you guys think? Do you think that do you think ketamine clinics could open their doors to nitrous as well? Maybe certain people would respond better to one over the other. I mean, who knows? I'm just speculating, but I do feel like this is pretty interesting in that regard. I don't know if you've given it any thought.
Quick correction. So there are clinical applications for nitrous oxide, right? We know that. It's just not psychiatric yet.
Right. It would be off-label use, right? If they started using it for depression. Obviously, you get it in the dentist's office and for small surgeries and stuff, right?
You do? I wish.
I mean, some folks
I got to twist the dentist's arm. Yeah. But, being real, this is a really big thing in the underground. There's been a lot of people using nitrous oxide for a long time. I wouldn't be surprised if the reason some people overuse it is because it
feels good,
interrupts their depression. Interestingly enough, the addictive psychedelic is ketamine. Is it possible that nitrous oxide also has some problematic qualities? So you look at Steve-O from Jackass, for instance. He has a lot of videos out there showing when he was in the depths of his kind of substance abuse and nitrous oxide issues. And, we know people that get a little too overboard with it. But that said, in the right environment with the right, and this is stuff you can buy on the internet and get it shipped to your house, right? Food grade, not medical grade. But don't do it, people. It's kind of gross in that there's so much waste. That's my primary issue with it. So much trash generated and metallic waste. And there's possibly some ozone issues too. So, let's be careful. But in the right setting with the right intention, we can do some really cool stuff with it, and we should explore it more. And doctors can prescribe it. So
it's really short.
Should a doctor
too.
do? Totally.
Right?
I get unhigh from it, from a balloon in 30 seconds to a minute, right?
And then it
It's
wears off like in a minute, right? Like it's pretty quick.
Yeah, you're back to normal.
Which is so interesting. Like if it did kind of work for depression or maybe help people raise out a little, like that's the shortest acting medicine of this kind that I've ever heard of. I mean, ketamine's also quite short, but it's still a whole 45 minutes to an hour or even longer, depending on the person and everything. Can you imagine? Or just like a 2-minute trip relieves your depression for a couple weeks. Like that's pretty cool and crazy to me.
It's pretty easy. Yeah. That's a lot more practical than a needle or a lozenge, right?
Or even a whole psilocybin journey. I mean, that's a whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's far more of a commitment, right? Yeah. And yeah, what does it mean that we can do that? So most of my exposure to it has been in a balloon where you're like kind of breathing like in and out, whatever, blow it out.
Yeah.
But like what they're talking about is a mask, like an oxygen mask you would see in like a video of hospital footage or like you might wear in a hospital bed, and a 25% concentration, I believe, is what the study was citing, of nitrous oxide relative to fresh, kind of normal air. And so that's really interesting. We don't need to go 50% or higher like that. You can maintain that 25% for a while. And maybe there's a different kind of dose response curve. Maybe it's the length of time. Maybe there's a lot of variables we can play with here. And, you know, medicine should be about what's the lowest effective dose. Like how little can we give you to cure this thing? And I think that's fair and judicious, right? Yeah. A lot to this topic. I can't wait for the future to see what happens here. This is highly available. I think you can make it relatively simply, though it's a little dangerous. Yeah, it's simple to make, but dangerous, I think.
Yeah, super interesting. So they're saying the antidepressant effects of a single treatment also increase and persisted over time, lasting as long as 4 weeks in some subjects. So they're really interesting.
Also,
I was reading the MAPS retrospective that came out, was it last year? Like the 65% number, 67% number no longer scored for having PTSD. And what they had like right after that was that the initial number was 56%. So like shortly after the study, it was 56 and then it grew to 67 or something like that.
Wow.
I was like, I kind of forgot that part, that like over time, the results got better for some folks.
That's really cool.
And I love that idea that we're kind of making a regenerative thing. It's like, you know, when I did my stem cell treatment on my hip, it was like, you know, you would hope that in 6 months you're cool, but realistically it's more like a year to a year and a half.
Well, yeah. And I guess like think about it, like you have an experience and you get insight and you feel better. But then if you start to go back and actually implement some of those changes, those insights, you're starting to change your life. You're starting to feel better. You're starting to improve. But yeah, it's like working with that. Yeah, it's like working with that material to make those changes, right? And I think that's like where psychedelics can really help. It's like give us the awareness and insight. Wow, this is where I need to make this change. And then going back and actually working on some of that stuff.
That's what it's been about for me. And yeah, it's kind of like then part of your integration is like, again, coming back to this idea of foundation, like building a life that's healthier, like building a healthier foundation that, is more like in tune to your purpose or like more aligned with like, what makes you not just happy, but like what makes you feel like worthy, you know? I think that's like kind of where a lot of, I think at least my own depression comes from, like, and then it gets into the insecurity and the, low self-esteem place. But when I feel really worthy in an experience, and then I keep building on that and things that make me feel like that, like doing all this crazy stuff. No, it's not crazy. I love my job. It helps. It keeps work. Like, you know, it's like a positive feedback loop. And so I think that's part of how this medicine starts to work for positive mental health, for sure. There's so much more to it, but just a little insight into my own process just to bring it back. Cool.
You immediately triggered me to think about Wayne and Garth, like we're not worthy. It's pretty
I
awesome.
always love your movie references, Joe. That's Wayne's World, everyone. If you're younger than us.
Oh yeah, it's an old movie. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, if you're under 30, sorry about that.
So we had one.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah. What are you gonna?
Let's do it. Oh no, I was wondering what was next.
Yeah, we have one other kind of interesting. It's more like a press release that I found actually on Think Wilder's newsletter this week. He posted to this under his novel Compound section. There's a press release that came out called Cybin selects anxiety disorder indication for proprietary psychedelic molecule CYB004. And so I had to go and look it up, like who is Cybin and what is CYB004? So Cybin is a biotechnology company focused on progressing psychedelic therapeutics. And this novel compound is basically what do they call it? The company's deuterated tryptamine development candidate. So it's like it's like basically a tryptamine.
We looked this up the other day. They do like kind of bond substitution. So like pull out some things and slap in some other things. So it essentially is the same efficacy, but that's what I remember. So you can look this up on Wikipedia, folks, if you want to check it out. But essentially it's modifying the molecule so that you have a proprietary, though very similar molecule to what's in the market already or being researched.
To a earlier press release by Cybin, and they said that the Cybin molecules, the CYB003 and 004, have been designed.
How much do they spend on those names?
I know. I need to think of something cooler. The Cybo. I don't know. Anyway, they have been designed to have a faster onset and a shorter duration of action while retaining all of the clinical benefits of psilocybin and other psychedelic compounds in development. They are being developed using proprietary formulations and delivery systems, including an FDA-approved inhalation platform and proprietary ODT technology, with the intention of improving the therapeutic outcomes for a number of psychiatric conditions. So then the other interesting thing about this is that instead of focusing on treatment-resistant depression or PTSD, they're focusing on anxiety disorder, both social anxiety disorder and general anxiety disorder, which I think is really cool. And I do also feel personally how psilocybin is helping me through some of my own anxiety issues. I imagine, like, if this, I have no idea what this novel compound feels like or anything, but if it is really similar to psilocybin and shorter acting and all that stuff, I think there could be a benefit here. I wonder, like, yeah, I have
my
so
initial
many
response
questions,
is take my money. Like, how can I get a shorter acting psilocybin? That sounds lovely.
It's literally
like
called lemon teching, though. Like, come on, you guys.
Inhalable. I like that. Inhalable. And then ODT. This is orally disintegrating tablets. I had to look it up.
Thank you.
So it dissolves within 60 seconds of touching your mouth, and you don't need water. So that's really interesting because tablets usually rely on breaking down and falling apart in the gut.
It reminds me of like sublingual cannabis and how that kicks in a little faster, like the oils, or there's these products.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Someone I love loves the kin slips that are like tongue strips. Didn't want to out this person. So that's really cool. Can you imagine how fast that would kick in though? Like we'd just be like tripping right away. Like that's kind of a lot. I don't know. Like inhaling DMT is like a very intense, like how fast the onset is. I kind of almost like the slow build up to LSD or psilocybin because you kind of just like get ready for the experience in a way, and it just kind of shoot
into the heart of darkness
is kind of
versus a cannonball.
A lot, but I'm like very curious. Obviously, call me Cybin. I want to try.
Cybin. I got a couple lines in Cybin. I can probably try to get somebody to talk to us about this.
I'll write about it.
You know, it's kind of weird because we're interested in different things than they are, right?
Yeah.
But we're also interested in the clinical stuff. You know, it's just that we want to know what it would feel like.
I need to know.
You know, how are we going to convince doctors to write us scripts for this stuff in the future? I don't know. Let's set up some sort of flotilla 100 miles off the coast of New York, and we can try stuff out there.
I'm ready.
Don't tell anybody. Yeah. So, yeah, no, it's really cool. Like I'm really excited about this whole. it's scary, yes, that all these new things are coming and big money is happening, but you can't change it. You as an individual are probably not going to make too much of a difference slowing down pharma development. Like, the churches didn't slow down Viagra development. So like, why can we slow down psychedelic development, right? Like there's no, and violence doesn't even work. Like you can barely do nonviolence. Like nonviolence is a lot more resource intensive than violence, but it's people aren't doing actions. So like what would you expect? Anyway, it's good in that it will be part of the American pharmacopoeia and hopefully the global pharmacopoeia at a certain point. Hopefully it'll be integrated really nicely and safely. But I think we're going to have trials and tribulations just like everywhere in the space. So we just got to hold on and, try our best to steer this thing in a good direction. I think a lot of the intentions out there are good in the pharma space. Like, just like everybody's kind of mad at psychiatrists, like they want to help you. They're there to help you. They have limited capacity and resources to help you, and they're doing their best. Most people do their best and don't have bad intent. And we got to remember that.
Totally. And I'll also just say, as someone who used to be prescribed options for anxiety, like, Klonopin and these kinds of like benzos, I mean, other options would be great. Like, yeah, there are other options, like SSRIs and things. But what really works for anxiety, like on the spot, are, benzos like Xanax and stuff. And they're pretty addictive. They make you feel like better anxiety-wise, but kind of just like zoned out and not really engaged. And people take them every day because they're prescribed that way. And like, not that that's bad or anything, but for me personally, it just wasn't how I wanted to live my life anymore. I was just kind of like, just not really totally engaged in my surroundings and my family and my loved ones and stuff. And so, I mean, any other options? I think folks just deserve to, have options. And this is a really interesting one. So, I mean, I'm here for it.
Say benzos and SSRIs are really difficult and not fun to come off of. So
that too. Benzos can be deadly, like alcohol, if you're on high enough doses.
Yeah, I think those are the only two that you can
like heroin
really
won't
get
kill
hurt
you
from
from
the detox
withdrawal,
alone.
but benzos can. It's dangerous stuff. And your tolerance grows so quickly. And people think people do need them, but, I don't know. It's complicated.
The guy that wrote Mad in America, I need to read this book because I keep talking about it now. He states that benzodiazepines show efficacy for maybe a 2-week period, and then their efficacy seems to go away on lowering anxiety generally. And then the added distress of coming off of it is
so much. I know people who it was so hard for. And, like over 15 years ago when I was a young person, I don't think they prescribe Klonopin like this anymore, but they would send me bottles of like hundreds of them and tell me to take like 2 or 3 a day. And just the system was kind of messed up. And so like, I don't think it's like that so much anymore because they learned how
it's improving.
It can be, but it's not a healthy way to just, send a young woman out into the world like that. Like, maybe getting to the root of why I felt so anxious could have been a little bit more helpful. But anyway, that's maybe a story for another episode. But I'm here for all the anxiety options. Yeah.
Sounds like you've been talking to Benjamin Mudge. And I can't wait for that.
No.
Did that episode come out?
Not yet. It wasn't a Solidarity Friday. So, we have another part 2 with Benjamin Mudge, who works on the bipolar psychedelics project of his own, coming out really soon. That's all we'll say about that. But it's a good one. It's a really
I cannot
good one.
wait. I should probably listen to it ahead of time. Just brilliant. Brilliant. And I'm loving these individuals like Will Hall and Matt Ball from Australia. Will Hall is from California, not Australia. Matt Ball is from Australia. Lovely people working on this problem. And I'm really excited to see how we're going to evolve this stuff. We do need to be okay with critiques of psychiatry and psychiatric hospitals. But we have to understand when they're essential and understand the role they do play. The same thing with psychiatric medications. Like, we we need these things. It's really great that we have them. If you've ever taken a benzodiazepine when you really need it, you would know.
It's true.
That said, if you were sitting in a cultural container that had the skills to allow us to do better, better meaning be with our process and ride it out in a healthy direction, like that would probably be more optional, but we don't have that yet.
And even just, even just thinking about my time at a place that did allow people to ride their process out, we weren't completely anti-psychiatry, so people did find benefit in taking medication just to get their sleep in checked, and that was really important. And also, we saw the limitations, or at least I saw some of the limitations of these services, and I definitely felt like I was romanticizing and putting a lot on that. And there's definitely limitations at times where somebody might have needed a higher level of care, and then just thinking about by keeping somebody in here when they actually need possibly medication or some sort of higher level of care. So yeah, we definitely need to critique the models, but again, not toss it out, right? Like we need to accept it too and say, hey, this could be really beneficial. We just released James Gesso just released a podcast, Adventures Through the Mind podcast that I was just on. It was a cafe panel exploring a spiritual awakening and spiritual emergence. And we had a really great conversation about this, just how to navigate these types of experiences, the limitations of psychiatry, but also when it can be beneficial. And the one thing that I brought up was James's podcast, What Happened to Tobias? Somebody that was in the medicine community, just really taking medicine. And this is the way he portrayed it in the episode. So, I definitely highly encourage people to go check that out. It's a tough episode to listen to. I remember feeling all sorts of emotions listening to it. Really struck some chords in me. But, this person probably needed traditional help, and nobody around it saw that, or he possibly didn't see that, because there is a stigma within, this alternative community, I'll say, pushing against. And it's been interesting kind of talking to people recently, our distrust in medicine at times, right? I think a lot of us have been harmed and maybe abused by the traditional system, so it's hard to develop trust in the systems when we have experienced harm, or maybe, people not listening to us when we are trying to advocate for our health within the system. So it's
very real.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though
my experiences with COVID have been a nightmare. So like the fact that doctors can't relate or diagnose or even really speak frankly to me has been a really big problem. And, that's just with COVID related stuff, and it's really fucked. So, and
I just keep coming back to this idea. Yeah. Like we talk about, like we can critique psychiatry. We're not saying like defund psychiatry. Like we're not saying get rid of it, right? Like, but a critique.
We barely have enough psychiatrists.
Well, a critique can lead to growth. That's why you take, workshops like as an art student, and critiques like lead to learning, and they can lead to change in a positive way. So that's all we're asking for. Like just thinking about things critically, and then perhaps we can find little things to just upgrade a little in a way, or just be, a little better sometimes. So that's all I think that's all we're saying. That's all I'm saying.
It will evolve and we will help.
It is.
Just understand that science is a series of provisional truths, and we want to keep updating our map, our knowledge map. And science is the best tool we have for understanding reality, but there are other ways of knowing. So that's kind of where we live in kind of this weird hybrid landscape of traditional ways of knowing, and then also the scientific method being the one that's gets us the most certainty. But then we look at critiques of how many of these studies have been recreated, right? Like this is a crisis right now in psychology. A lot of our fundamental theories are based on studies that have only been done once, and can't be replicated successfully. So we have to do a whole revision here at the base of psychology. And then how do psychedelics fit in? Well, thank God we have psychedelics to help us understand this stuff now. We now have a really powerful tool at the point in history where we need to reframe psychology or like I don't even know, reinvent psychology. Is that even the right framing? I don't even know. You're the one with the master's.
Revision. I like that one. That term. Revision.
Yes.
Thank you. Revisionist psychology. I'm in. Do we have time for a couple of these questions? If there were questions.
Sure.
Yay for LSD. Yay for shrooms and peyote. Saved my life as a child. Yeah, totally. Love me some LSD. Do you sell? No, we do not sell drugs. I wish. Go to jail, and jail's not too fun. Yeah. I love being psychedelic. Thank you. Self-medicated psilocybin is dangerous. Debatable. David Nutt's study that came out in 2009 showed that LSD and psilocybin were substantially safer. Actually, in fact, the safest drugs he studied, and alcohol being the most dangerous. And you just look this up, David Nutt drug harm scale. You'll find that one. So second part, is there a group to submit testimonials? I don't know what you mean there. There's a really good Facebook group that we run. If you're not on Facebook, don't join Facebook for the group, but it's called Psychedelics Today Group. And there's over 4,000 people there, and there's a lot of testimonials. There's places like Erowid, EROWID, where you can get tons and tons and tons of testimonials. Yeah.
We have someone asking.
What do you think about this thing about contaminated ketamine?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it can be definitely like cut with other stuff for sure if you're buying it on the black market. Like, yeah. Are there ketamine testing? Can you test your ketamine?
You can always test drugs for the presence of other things.
Yeah, exactly. So test it for fentanyl.
In the clinic, it's usually in a liquid form. And what the old ravers used to do is break it open and microwave it so it dries out, and then you have crystal.
There's lots of ways to do that. You can do it on the stovetop. I don't know from experience.
Right. I've never actually even had ketamine in my possession outside of a clinical spot. Like, it's kind of weird at this point in my life that I haven't, but I'll fix that in the future. But, it's, anything that's powdered and sold, there's not much reason to expect it to not be cut. Absolutely. So you've got to be really selective on your sourcing, and growing your own is always a great option, as this person suggests, Robert there. I love growing mushrooms. I wish I could still do it. Given what I do, I can't grow anymore. Though I should probably just start growing gourmet mushrooms because I like it so much. I'll get on that soon.
We have one here. Someone, do you recommend shrooms for OCD? I'm thinking of microdosing. Obviously, we don't recommend anything, but there is some literature on this that you should check out. Not on microdosing, but I think there was a study on psilocybin for OCD that did have some positive results. All about, psilocybin can make, your brain a little more flexible. And if OCD is about like kind of being stuck in rigid ways of thinking where you really, it really is like kind of impossible to not, however your OCD is represented, but you have to do certain things before you can do other things. I think psychedelics for some folks, and with the proper integration and support and all, might be able to help. Move beyond that a little in a way, have some other routes to take. Also check out, what's that comedian's name who really worked with mushrooms a lot, and it helped.
It was Shane Moss for OCD.
It helped his OCD a ton. Was it Shane Moss? I feel it's the other guy. What's his name?
Oh, Adam Strauss. You're right. Adam Strauss is the OCD guy.
His one-man show goes into his experience a lot. So there's definitely some, and I also think, Erowid and other websites would be good places to look that up. We should do a blog on that. Maybe find someone with a first-person experience can talk about how it worked for them. I think that'd be really interesting to hear from like a subjective point of view of like the difference, like before and after doing their work, their medicine work. I think that'd be pretty fascinating, actually. So I'll have to look. If that is you and you're a writer, you should email me. But yeah, cool.
Well, I'm feeling complete unless there's anything else y'all wanted to answer.
That's good.
I think that's about it. I'm getting a little tired, but this was so fun. I think we should do more of these hybrids if it works. These IG Live, podcast hybrids. If folks enjoy this, let us know, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
That'd be great. And I have to remind myself not to put an Instagram timer on because I got booted off there.
Yeah, I think we all just did. Maybe it was an hour long, but cool.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess we'll wrap up. We are at an hour and a half or so. So thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, you can email us at support@psychedelicstoday.com. And also be sure to check out our courses, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. We'll be kicking off our live class a month from now, July 22nd. Today is June 22nd. So yeah, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. So thank you, everybody, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Psychedelics Today. Take care.